All right, welcome back again to another episode of the Contrarians. This is our side show, the Contrarians Worst Album Edition, where we look at a bad album by a band and go through it, and obviously a little bit more about the catalog as well. This one really pains me to do because I've been on record saying ZZ Top is my favorite band of all time. It's hard to do that. I mean, there's two or three or four that are always jogging through my head as top band of all time, but this is certainly one of my favorites. Just a quick overview on ZZ Top. Everybody knows who they are. We won't say too much about them, but they started off with ZZ Top's first album, 1971, I believe this is. But then hit it kind of big with Tres Hombres, moving on with the famous big messy Mexican food gatefold in there. Band out of Texas, a band that stayed in Texas. They essentially, they were quite maligned as being like a Southern rock band and from Texas and not loved by the singer-songwriter cognoscenti in New York or Detroit or anything like that. They always have not really been critics' darlings, but they slowly became ingratiated and loved over time. We're talking about Billy Gibbons here, Frank Beard, the drummer, and Dusty Hill, the bassist, who we sadly lost recently. But Tres Hombres, after that, they do Tejas, which is one of my favorite ZZ Top albums of all time. I probably have picked this as my favorite ZZ Top album, 76. Then they took a hiatus, came back, got a new label deal. They were on London before. They came back with Warner Brothers, put out Degueo, and continued their hit-making ways. Tres Hombres, like I say, was the first hit. That one's gold. I think it's still maybe just gold. But Degueo does well. They follow that up with El Loco, and then things blow right up with Eliminator. They come up with this sort of modern boogie rock sound. It's still boogie. It's still pretty heavy. It's just guitar charged right throughout. But that thing just completely blows up, and their whole image with the beards and the hats and the sunglasses and the old song called Cheap Sunglasses. All of this comes together with the car and the girls and the themed videos, and Eliminator goes diamond. They do Afterburner, Recycler. Soon they're off that label again. They're off Warner's and onto RCA, onto a new label deal. But the glory days are over. They do amazing business all through the 80s. Antenna comes out. Where do we got an Antenna here? There's your Degueo. There's Antenna. Love Antenna to death. Then the later ones. There's your Six Pack. This is a controversial 6 CD set where the songs got remixed by Bill Ham, not to everyone's liking. There's your Eliminator. So some of the later ones, you've got Rhythmine, which is I've been screaming to the hills. Anybody who listens saying this is an absolute masterpiece of late ZZ Top. You've got Mescalero a little later. In between, there's XXX. And then La Futura, which is the last one. Billy Gibbons has had his solo career and done some really cool things there with some very ZZ Top-like albums. But yeah, and I love Mescalero as a late period one. There's your Eliminator CD there. So essentially the short strokes on this band is pretty ingrained, beloved band in the 70s, doing pretty good business. Power trio, boogie rock. I consider them one of these bands that makes the blues interesting, kind of like a Foghat or a Status Quo and ZZ Top. I kind of put them all together. They do huge business in the 80s, and then they just become this kind of respected band doing some pretty interesting, innovative things. Billy Gibbons is one of my favorite guitarists of all time. Some pretty harsh and extreme production values that they start in the 80s and then continue on through the 90s and the 2000s. Don't make a lot of albums, but they're out there on the classic rock circuit. I always thought this was pretty cool. There's your Degueo oversleeve, and there's your Degueo inside vinyl. That's a really cool album cover of theirs as well. So that's ZZ Top, and as it stands now, sadly losing Dusty. They have played without Dusty, a replacement bass player. Maybe ZZ Top will go on, but all these bands are getting really old. But and as much as I love ZZ Top, They definitely have a worst album. Every band has a worst album. I hate the comments when people say, "Oh, no, nobody has. There are no bad albums or whatever." But Tim and I agree. Statistically speaking, sensibly, every band's got a worst album, and we're in agreement on this one. And I'm going to turn it over to Tim. Tim, take it away. Tell us what ZZ Top's worst album is.
Thanks, Martin. So yeah, I mean, if you I think Marco put it really well when he and I did the Queensryche worst album episode. So if you say you like everything and you give everything a 10, let's say, if you're just one of those fans, that takes away from the greatness of the truly excellent albums. Does that mean you give the really good ones a 12? So ZZ Top came up on my radar, like they did a lot of people my age, with the Eliminator videos. I mean, you couldn't stop them. And I guess to me, they were a new band. I guess I quickly realized they weren't. But when I was 9, 10 years old, that was my first exposure to ZZ Top. And what I find interesting about that, just to talk about that Eliminator period a little bit, I always thought, and I was really surprised to read this, that, it was like the trilogy of videos, right? So you had Legs, Sharp Dressed Band, and Give Me All Your Lovin'. I always thought that those 3 songs were sort of interchangeable as far as popularity. But man, that is just not the case. So Legs was the big hit. That went to, I think, number 8 on Billboard. Give Me All Your Lovin' only went to 37. And Sharp Dressed Man only went to 56 on the pop chart. That has got to be one of the best known songs of the 80s that your average radio listener would know that didn't hit the top 40. I don't understand that at all. Wow. Yeah. So it was a truly, it must have seemed to the band and to the public at large, and it's excellently portrayed in the ZZ Top documentary, which you had a part in from Banger, little old band from Texas, how they made this decision, this radical decision to all of a sudden embrace the dance beats and make sure that all those songs were a danceable tempo, just the right amount of BPM. And the idea of mixing I don't even know what you'd call it, Martin. They're so utterly unique. Are they Southern rock? They don't sound particularly Southern rock. They just sound like ZZ Top. But to mix their traditional sort of boogie, bluesy sound, swampy Billy and Dusty trading off the lead vocals with dance beats. I mean, so here's this band, and at the time, I'm sure the critics were saying, okay, here's this old band. They were all in their mid-30s. They weren't old. But now they've got singles that are having 12-inch remixes done to them, like a band like Duran Duran would have. Just crazy. And it worked. It worked in spades. Like you said, Eliminator's Diamond album. They follow that up in 85 with Afterburner, which is an awful lot like Eliminator. Really, it's an awful lot like it. It's kind of derivative. There's one song on there, and I can never think of what it is. I think it might be Dippin' Low in the Lap of Luxury, which is essentially Give Me All Your Lovin' with new lyrics. You could almost sing it over top of it. And sadly, that continues. So it's another 5 years before another ZZ Top album comes out. And sadly, that's the one we're going to talk about today, is this one, Recycler, now 1990. I've been thinking a lot about, over the weekend, how to set this up. Calling this album Recycler is almost like wearing a sign that says, kick me. You're almost just, come on, critics, let's hear it, right? This is basically Eliminator Part 3. And, so Eliminator, great, truly novel when it came out. Afterburner, yeah, okay, it kind of begrudgingly, it's like, why would you mess with success, right? This album almost sounds to me as if it was supposed to come out in 1987 or 1988. It almost seems to me like someone at Warner Brothers one morning in early 1990 woke up and said, oh, did we not put that out? It doesn't sound 1990 to me. Oh, man, does it ever sound behind the times? And they're just asking for it, calling it Recycler. And that also goes down to the cover art. You held up the ZZ Top 6-pack, which was that's where they packaged, DeGueo was already out on CD. So they said, let's put, album 1 through 5 and then 7, 2 albums on each disc. Yeah, that came out. So here's the back cover of the booklet of the 6-pack. Yeah. Now take a look at the cover to Recycler. It's almost like, wow, you couldn't even come up with a novel album title. And I really listened through this, to be as critical as I could. And also because I like this band, I like this band a lot. Cool, did it on vinyl. Yeah, that really, yeah. When you hold up the vinyl and then you hold up the six pack over top of it, it really looks like it's from the same packaging. um, so this comes out in 1990. I think it's like the first half of 1990. The first thing that was released from it was the single Double Back. And I think they were really trying to make that like a summer hit, summer blockbuster soundtrack hit. It was from Back to the Future 3. The band actually have a cameo in that movie where there's a scene where it's in the Old West and they're actually playing Double Back, but they're playing it as like an old style, I don't know, bluegrass band or whatever. And that song just never really took hold with people. And I've listened to it, it's okay, but I just don't think it had what it takes to be that blockbuster soundtrack hit. And it's almost comparable. Like, movie buffs would probably tell you the first Back to the Future is kind of an 80s classic, as was Eliminator. You get to the third time around, it's like, okay, we've been there and done that. And thankfully, and we'll get into this too, they do change radically after that. And they make some really, really interesting music and some really good albums and some really albums. But Recycler is kind of the nadir of that period. Like they've really milked that electronics thing just as much as they possibly can. There are songs on here that not only sound like older songs from Eliminator and Afterburner, there's a couple of songs on here that sound like each other. And I don't know if it's Give It Up and Love Thing. I don't know. There's even within the songs on the album, there's just absolutely nothing new about it. Same production sound, it's still Bill Ham and it's still using, I'm guessing, the electronic drums. I'm not 100% sure about that. The one song that kind of has a little bit of the classic ZZ Top sound is My Head's in Mississippi. That's kind of got a LaGrange shuffle beat to it a little bit. And that was a video. Give It Up was a video. And of course, Double Back was a video. The album went platinum because it's ZZ Top. They're well loved. People bought it. They did, they went out on tour. I think they had Extreme opening for them on that tour. And it seems to me they had the Black Crowes, but there was some controversy there. Chris Robinson said something in the press and they got kicked off the tour and all of that. But yeah, Recycler, like I said, just daring people to point out that, well, yeah, this does sound recycled. And I don't know what the critical, consensus about it was when it came out, but, it went platinum strictly on momentum. None of the singles hit the top 40. I mean, you're talking about a band that, like Legs was a top 10 single. They came out with Afterburner. Sleeping Bag was a top 10 single. They had Stages, Rough Boy, Velcro Fly. They all hit the top 40. None of the songs from this hit the top 40. Again, I think it was just too long. Between 1985 and 1990, music had changed. We're not talking about grunge just yet, but nobody was really looking for a new ZZ Top album. And I remember seeing, actually, it was the cassette single. I remember seeing the cassette single, the Double Backs, that had ZZ Top, had a big Back to the Future logo in it. I was like, oh, what's that? Like, they're still around, So, and that kind of, that sort of, it almost sounds like they were bored making the album. And like, there's nothing bad track for track. It just sounds like ZZ Top, but you culminate that and it's just an album full of average songs and they're capable of a lot more than that. Like, and I don't think I'm that far off. I don't know if a lot of people generally consider this album to be in high esteem among ZZ Top fans. What do the people say, Martin?
Well, okay, yeah. So a couple points. Yeah, we go from diamond, then we go to 5 times platinum down to platinum. A big drop. The first one after this goes platinum as well. But yeah, one of the interesting things about this record is I think a lot of people can agree, whether you like it or not, in terms of the various types of music ZZ Top do over their career. I think most people would agree, when you think about it kind of deeply about creativity, that this is the least creative album they ever did, where the creativity just seems on a low hum. And you made a great point there about the song sounding the same as other songs and each other, because I went through this and played some of the up-tempo ones, and I'm almost thinking in a lot of cases, like, there's no real riff to what's going on. And it's not strumming, because Billy Gibbons is not a strumming hard rock guitarist, but there's songs that just seem to cruise along on blues licks, rather than proper riffs. And you see that happening a lot on these songs. So yeah, all of these up-tempo ones sound pretty similar to each other. One thing that always annoyed me, I mean, this is this is on the Wikipedia page, but it's the typical band trying to pump up what they're doing at the time. And Billy Gibbons, in trying to sell this album, he was saying, "Oh, it's a great combination of our new electronic synthesizer thing and the old thing." So he goes, "A reminiscent of our earlier music, which is why we call Recycler our Tres Hombres / Eliminator album, right? And it's just not Tres Hombres at all, except for ripping off LaGrange, right? For one song. That's really about it." And he even points out that song, like there's one or two songs where they don't go overboard on the production, and the whole drum thing is a crazy thing. You can see on the Steve Hoffman forums is a really cool thing that goes through a lot of sound and stuff. And I've seen a lot of quotes from Terry Manning on putting together the drum sounds of these, and it's very complicated. The layering and the little bit of humanity mixed with a lot of machines and this and that and effects added to them. So it's actually a very complicated story on all the drumming and all this stuff. But So Billy says we didn't abandon the ground. We covered on Eliminator and Afterburner. You can still hear the sequencers and synthesizers, but they're much more unobtrusive. Not true. We allowed some of the rougher elements of the band to come shining through. Not true. My Head's in Mississippi, which is one of the first completed tracks in the album, is a great example of how we mix the new with the old. And again, it's just not a very good song. It's not a well written song. Our Patreon subscribers have said a couple of things. Let's see. I think Marco gave them a bit of a poll to do, but looks like he just picked the worst suspects to compare. I guess he gave them maybe 4 to compare. But Recycler got 10 votes as worst album. Antenna got 1. XXX got 1. Mescalero got 1. Reed Little says, well, the results of this poll are not exactly a surprise so far. Jamie Laszlo says, I actually like Recycler. Mescalero is by far my least favorite. I love Mescalero. I think I'll get to that in a minute. But Kevin Latham voted Recycler as worst album. This band has a pretty stellar catalog and smart enough to keep changing it up. That's true. I mean, even when I'm not on board with ZZ Top, which is really rare, it's this record, Afterburner, as we'll talk about a little bit of XXX, and I'm a little bit down on the first 2 as being just a little bit too raw and too close to the blues rather than the hard rocking stuff. But other than that, I mean, I'm just loving to death pretty much every single ZZ Top album. Not so much Futura either. My problem with the later stuff is that I love the whole concept of it. I love the production. I love what Billy's doing, and the dirty secret of having Greg Morrow in on drums on some of that stuff. But where I don't think it works very well is just the odd time, which is XXX and Futura, that the albums are too short of good songs, and there's a bit too much that's not great on it. And that's why Mescalero, I think, is amazing, because it's just entertaining, wildly entertaining throughout, and Recycler's heavy and entertaining more or less throughout. But anyways, Peter Jones says, I love Recycler. Played it constantly as a demo album at the CD store when I was a purchaser back when it came out. Just having the song 2000 Blues on it will keep it from ever being anywhere near the bottom of the list in my book. Did you want double meat? How about some fries on the side? Classic stuff. Do I prefer their earlier material? Of course, but this is no way near as awful as it gets labeled. Like I say, he says I prefer the earlier material. I'm absolutely equally in love with the later material, and maybe even more so in terms of just the approach, as I am the earlier stuff. I love what they did, in the RCA years and on, sort of thing. Stephen Erlewine of All Music said some pretty insightful things. He gave it a 2 out of 5. He says the continuation of Eliminator synthesized blues made sense on Afterburner since it arrived 2 years after its predecessor. ZZ Top's choice to pursue that direction on Recycler is puzzling. Since a full 5 years separate this album from Afterburner, it's not that they continue to follow this path, it's that they embalm it. So I thought that was pretty cool. This is like the embalmed, this is like the zombie version of Eliminator, right? Creating a record that may be marginally ballsier than its predecessor, I don't know, but lacking the sense of goofy fun and warped ambition that made Afterburner fascinating. I don't find Afterburner fascinating, that's for sure. And the worst thing about it all, it doesn't seem like the band realizes how uncomfortably ironic the title Recycler is, like you say. It's quite bizarre, eh? Like they're just daring you to hate this record, right? But in terms of rankings, Ultimate Classic Rock had XXX last and Recycler second to last, then Antenna. Let's see, still reaching for Eliminator style success. Recycler once again comes up a little short. Still, it's not without a few minor classics, including Decision or Collision. I totally disagree, which rattles along like a classic muscle car that's a can or two short of oil. Bucking and squeaking and then lurching forward with a kind of thrilling unpredictability. I think it's completely predictable. All they need was 7 or 8 more of these. Okay. Rate Your Music had XXX last, Mescalero second to last, Recycler last. I won't read this review. Best Ever albums had XXX last, Mescalero second to last, Antenna third to last. And I love Antenna. I love Antenna Head and Pincush, all those songs. I mean, I thought that was a really innovative way to combine the electronics and the blues thing. Society of Rock had XXX last, Mescalero second to last, Recycler third to last. Ranker had it middle of the pack, so that's the aggregator, and I found that quite interesting. Songs played live from Recycler. Here's where ZZ Top kind of proved that they weren't really into this album very much. You have to go all the way down to 13th most played song by ZZ Top across the years with My Head's in Mississippi. And then you drop way down to find another Recycler song, number 54, Give It Up, number 56, Concrete and Steel. Man, that's such a automatic, robotic, brain dead sort of song. And then down to 61 for Love Thing. So the songs off of this album are not played very much. So,
and it's just like you said, like Double Back was supposed to be their big comeback single. That's not even That wasn't even one of those songs that you mentioned. What's really interesting, and the more I think about it, the fact that Recycler isn't constantly put last, do you think maybe it might have something to do with the fact that people go, well, everything after they weren't on Warner Brothers anymore is supposed to be bad, right? Because they can't come up with anything new. But, these guys, the guys in ZZ Top are very clever. Billy's a very, very clever guy. Yeah. He doesn't, You've talked to him. Seems like he doesn't say a lot, but he's thinking all the time.
Yeah.
This album, now that you mentioned, this was the end of their Warner Brothers contract. This was their last new album. I mean, they did the Greatest Hits album with the 2 new songs, one of which was a cover. But that was it. And it's almost like it feels like a contractual obligation album. And it's like, look, we got to get out of this contract. But think about it in another alternate timeline, because I agree with you. Antenna was great. The fact that I think it was a good combination of the electronics and a much heavier, dirtier guitar sound. Imagine if Antenna was the album that came out in 1990. Pincushion might have been a big hit. Breakaway, Girl in a T-Shirt, like those were the singles that came off it. Might have been a total different story that we're talking about now. Because they did whatever it was that led them in that direction. And unfortunately, Antenna is the only really successful album they had in that RCA period. But I agree with you. Rhythm Mean is fantastic. That's when they discovered this dirty, bluesy guitar, but some excitement. It's really, really dirty riffing. And like you said, the rumor has it's not actually Frank playing, but it's still an effort. You can put on Rhythm Mean.
An amazing Greg Morrow performance on here. Greg Morrow, of course, drummed for Kim Mitchell as well. But the drumming is fantastic. The production is killer. Heavy songs. Late in the sequence on this, there are some real rockers towards the end. Your My Mind Is Gone, Loaded, Pretty Head, Humbucking Part 2. A song at the very end, 12th track called Humbucking Part 2. You think it's just going to be a throwaway Billy, instrumental joking around thing. Super heavy, excellent, real song. This is a great album. I've often called this my favorite ZZ Top album, but I think my favorite is going to stay Tejas or Deguello, but those three together are all my favorites. So, and
it's funny because Tejas is the album that often gets neglected on hits packages, unless you're getting a box set or sort of a deluxe thing. But to me, you can leave. You don't need to put anything from Recycler on a best of ZZ Top package.
Yeah.
You can easily skip that one. I think Tejas deserves a little bit more attention. That's a fun album. You've got Snappy Khaki and Arrested for Driving While Blind. And it's a different sounding album for them, but a lot of their albums sound different. But So
yeah, it was the first one. It was the first one. Just quickly, I mean, where they came up with an innovative production strategy. I mean, the other ones were pretty straightforward, humorless, sober productions up to this point. We forgot to mention Fandango, of course, that's in there as well. Which is that side is my favorite ZZ Top side of all time, but unfortunately, it's the live half as well. Yeah, but so those first four have basic, very basic, dry, old style production, but Teos has this interesting small band playing in a matchbox style that I really love. I love some of the feathery drum sounds on there, and the fact that it's not very heavy at all. There's a couple songs that are written heavy but not recorded heavy. I just think it's an amazing record that way. But yeah, I know you wanted to at one point. You were thinking, is it going to be Recycler, or I might pick XXX. Tell me your views on XXX.
Yeah, that's, to me, XXX, which came out to like little or no fanfare. It came out 1999, and I remember reading about it in Classic Rock magazine, and it said something about it doesn't bode well for a classic band when their album isn't even released in the UK, because they were reviewing a Japanese import copy. I don't ever remember hearing any of the songs, seeing videos or anything like that. But XXX starts out almost as a continuation of Rhythmine, with like that really dirty, gritty sound, almost like, and I don't know, I know Billy's he's a gearhead, he's a tone chaser, and he never wants the guitars to sound normal. But it almost sounds like, I don't know if he ever plays like one of those baritone guitars, but it is like it sounds so low end when he's playing, almost like he's playing like bass on guitar. And that sound continues into XXX. But what I find at a certain point when you're going along with that album, first of all, it's a very long album, and you're taking a chance with a long album. We've talked about this many times. Once you hit the CD age, if you're going to put a lot of songs that now, boy, they'd better be good. They'd better be just killer, one right after the other. And they did that with Mescalero, and they did that with Rhythmine. Those are pretty lengthy albums, but they sustain your interest, right? That's one thing I do like about La Futura. I actually kind of like that album, but it's pretty short. It's only got 10 songs on it. But XXX starts to almost disappear into its own eccentricity. Like they just get really, really weird. And then there's those live songs on the end. They for some reason, they take Pincushion and then they rewrite the lyrics as Sin Pusher. I don't know why they felt the need to do that. You've got the cover of Teddy Bear where they slow it way, way down. And I know Dusty loved his Elvis because they did Jailhouse Rock on Fandango, but they slow it way down. They got Hey Mr. Millionaire with Jeff Beck, I think, on some vocals. You got to give it up for the guys. They just completely, really, once they finished Recycler, which I think was, like I said, more of a contractual obligation sound, after that, they bowed to no master but themselves, or should I say Billy. I mean, I'm pretty sure he sets the pace, right? Mm-hmm. But XXX is almost a victim of its own weirdness. And I found after a while, it was like, what are they doing? Not that it wasn't memorable, because it's certainly unique, and it's more interesting to listen to than Recycler, but I don't know if it's as tuneful. So that's why it's up in the air. But I think there's definitely more creativity at work on XXX. That's why it didn't go to the bottom for me. Recycler is like literally what it says. It says like, we're out of ideas. Let's just get out of this contract and let's sign a new deal and we'll do what we want. And which is what they ended up doing. It sounds like these were songs that they had kicking around, early versions of songs that would later become the Eliminator and Afterburner tracks. And in and of itself, again, it's ZZ Top. It's not bad sounding. And it you put it on in the background, you're like, oh yeah, that's ZZ Top. But if you're really listening with a critical ear, there's nothing new with it. Like Eliminator was new when it would have come out. There would have been nothing like it. Certainly nothing that they had done. Afterburner, I happen to really think the singles on Afterburner were really, really good. And to me, that elevates it a little bit. But once you get to Recycler, there aren't even any killer or can't miss singles off of it. So it just kind of falls flat. Yeah.
Yeah. Funny story about Billy told me this story of Poke Chop Sandwich. And I'm not sure if this is if this is a drummer he played with or just an old blues drummer he knew from around town or whatever. But he says there was this old blues drummer that never used his floor tom because, you know, his wife would make him a pork chop sandwich, and he'd keep his lunch on the floor tom. That's what his floor tom was for. So he didn't use his floor tom. So he said about that. But yeah, we got Crucifix a flat on here, right? Like what are you talking about, right? But yeah, my problem with this album is everything you said. Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. But to me, Mescalero. It's the same kinds of songs, but and Mescalero is also the same kinds of songs as La Futura, which I love the concept of these three albums together that way. But my problem is Mescalero is long and 3/4 of it is absolutely a laugh riot and totally interesting. To me, La Futura is short. It's a little bit like the AC/DC rock or bust for me. Short, and I happen to not like the songs very much. So La Futura, it's like I only like about half of it and it's short. And Mescalero, I love 3/4 of it and it's long. And this is I only kind of like half of it because, like you say, it disappears into its own eccentricity. That's perfect. But it is the same kinds of songs as on La Futura, and well, more so Mescalero. Mescalero is much more comedic and extreme in the production and less conservative in the songwriting, even than La Futura. But this one is as extreme as Mescalero as well. But yeah, funny with the live and that whole Sin Pusher thing, crazy, right? But yeah, there you go. I mean, so I think all the rankers really get this right. It really has to be for two different reasons, Recycler and XXX, and really nothing else really comes to mind. I know essentially out there among the purists, me being a little down on the Brown period albums, the first two albums, Rio Grande Mud and ZZ Top's first album. That's a bit contrarian. I've taken some heat for that. Like most ZZ Top fans quite like those first two albums a lot. I'm just putting them kind of near the back because I don't think it really gets heated up until Tres Hombres kind of thing. But there you go. That's our ZZ Top worst album edition. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below, whether the rankers got it right, whether Tim and myself got it right. I mean, we're basically in agreement here on this one. We've also got a Patreon situation which Marco keeps really thriving with all those panels and stuff we do, Metal Trivia Night, all that kind of stuff. So there's a thriving Patreon thing that we do for the folks over there. But yeah, ZZ Top worst album. Go play this stuff. Let us know what you think. Talk to you soon.